It's a shame God's not doing anything good in our lives. We had 2 new people at the Capitol today. So we've lost about a handful of people due to the Capitol closing, but we've picked up a few, so it's been good. Don? Yeah, with all new. We're about to put 4 mug shots on there. So Miss Janie came Sunday morning. Carter, we're going to baptize him, and we're going to baptize 2 more. I think we're going to keep going down the wall. Just keep going. Yeah. It is a good problem to have. And we are thankful for it. Okay, well, how about we pray? I have more than enough for you all today. That there's a chance it'll take us 2 weeks. Actually, I took something out that we may just do at a later time, maybe even next time. So. Okay, so we are looking at the second of the 10 Commandments, and it is, of course, similar to the first. We talked about why that is and how that's been read and whatnot, but I do take this as the second of the 10 Commandments. I've shared last week that the Jews would see this as part of the first commandment. Well, that's not true. What we saw last week and this week are considered the second commandment in their reckoning. But nevertheless, let's read Exodus 20, 4-6. And because the 10 Commandments in the Bible are called the 10 words, we call them 10 Commandments, we've chosen a single word to associate with each of the 10 Commandments. Last week we used the word love. This week we want to look at the word glory. So chapter 20, verses 4-6 says, "You shall not make for yourself a carved image or any likeness of anything that is in heaven above, or that is in the earth beneath, or that is in the water under the earth. You shall not bow down to them or serve them, for I, the Lord, your God, am a jealous God, visiting the iniquity of the fathers on the children to the third and fourth generation of those who hate me, but showing steadfast love to thousands of those who love me and keep my commandments." Many of you all know that I have Scot-Irish ancestry. With a name like Mick Daniel, that makes that kind of obvious. So I'm particularly fond of my Scottish ancestors' role in the Reformation. And the most prominent Scottish reformer is, without a doubt, a man by the name of John Knox, a good bearded preacher. And he spent 19 months after his conversion as a galley slave on a French Catholic ship. To be a galley slave was a miserable, miserable life. Knox would refer back to it quite a bit in his life. He really, really suffered from it. And being that these were all Scottish Protestants on a French ship, which were all Catholic, that they would regularly observe Mass and venerate a number of statues on the boat, particularly that of Mary. And on one particular occasion, we're not told Knox did this, but Knox is the one telling the story in his History of the Scottish Reformation. So most of us assume this is a story about Knox, just even though his name isn't identified. But they are threatened if they don't practice Mass and then venerate a statue. And one gentleman was particularly stubborn about it, where he says, when asked to kiss the statue of Mary, he was told, or Knox says, "Trouble me not, such an idol is accursed, and therefore I will not touch it." At which point the statue was shoved violently into his hands, at which point Knox took the statue and he threw it into the sea. And he said this, one of my favorite stories in church history: "Let Our Lady now save herself. She is light enough, let her learn to swim." Now, I think that's funny. It is humorous. It tells a lot about the sort of person Knox was. Knox rather infamously made Mary, Queen of Scots, cry. In fact, the one sermon we have of him was a diatribe against the Queen, and the reason we have this sermon is because the Queen was there. So, how would you like to hear a sermon where you are the subject and it's not a compliment? Knox was, again, long beard, quite the dude. Recounting the story, Knox later wrote, "No Scottish man was urged again with that idolatry." I'm sure that is the case. Well, this command is best known for not making any graven images. And I suspect that from our perspective, it is one of the more bizarre commandments because the way the West worships now, largely because of the triumph of Judeo-Christianity, is that we don't have graven images just laying all around. At least we don't think that's the way. When my wife and I went to Trinidad, we went to a Hindu temple, big old massive thing. And it was like going back into the past. I mean, one giant statue, I'm sure you remember it, it was like a humanoid. It was some sort of like animal, had a tail. It was. I mean, I thought I was in ancient Babylon or something. Very pink everywhere. I don't know what that means. I just remember pink. And we were only allowed to go so far because we would have desecrated the place that I think had already been desecrated by paganism. But anyways, but it's rare for us to find this sort of stuff. But this is a rather relevant command. Let's start with a prologue discussion of this. And that is I just want to highlight a few things in this commandment. First of all, notice right away it says, "You shall not make for yourself." That phrase is interesting. This is the language of creation. We made in the image of God, we create because our Creator creates. Right? We are the beneficiaries of that. We've been created by our Creator. And as such, we like to create things. And this is our theology of art. So we construct, we create, we fashion, we design, we build, we establish, all of that. And so on the one end, the text is not warning against creation, design, art, not any of that. Think about it. Particularly Christianity, we didn't just build functional buildings. We built architectural works of art. Now, the way the system is, all of our buildings are boring. Look at a new church, look at an old church. I mean, there's a clear difference. Everything's boring. Look at a new government building, look at an old government building. I mean, things have gotten ugly now because our religion is ugly. But anyways, it takes that language of creation, but it does reflect something about the human condition. We build houses, and then we live in them. We build tables, and we eat off of them. We build boats and we enjoy them. We build businesses and we expand them. We build churches and we worship in them, cathedrals and marvel at them, roads and we drive on them, art and we appreciate it. And so that is good. That is a good, godly thing's reflection of who we are, made in the image of God. The problem comes, and this is where graven images becomes an idol for us, when good things become God things. Mohler's helpful here, the president Southern. Therein is the problem, the seduction and the allure. We are homo idolater, a term he made up, the creature who would fashion our own God. This is the true perennial heresy. East of Eden, isolation is always close at hand. We are natural-born idolaters, and it is good that we admit this up front. So in every aspect of our lives, it's easy for us to turn the good gifts of God into the source of what leads to the destructive things. That we turn things into gods. And so right away we are warned, this gift you've been given to design, to build, to erect, to establish, to create, is that is good, but do not turn it itself into the idol. In fact, it is in a few chapters in Exodus. This stands right in the middle of the book of Exodus, essentially. Later in Exodus, God has Moses choose architects and designers to design the tabernacle. And we have their names. They're designers, and they designed it. How would you like to have that job? Hey, God's going to live here. Make sure it looks nice. Okay? Like, we have to do that for my mother-in-law. Let me tell you, I ain't going to put in a whole lot of work. But if it's God, you know, I'm not sure I'm qualified. Okay? And so we see that tension right away. But notice it's don't make for yourself a carved image or any likeness. Here are two words that should jump off the page for us. Image and likeness. So let's start here. What was idol worship in the ancient Near Eastern world? Now, this is a foreign world to us, and we have to understand it in order to really understand this command. That's why we may not get through everything. That's okay. We do not, so I don't have a statue of Jesus up here, or Moses or Noah. Like we don't have that. We have pretty flowers. That is about as iconoclastic as we get as Baptists. It's also why our churches are born. That's a separate issue. We would do well to utilize art, but anyways, that's neither here nor there. Statues and other images in the ancient Near Eastern world were not in themselves divine, but rather they were vessels by which unseen deities would attach themselves to the physical. So if it helps, think of it as you have a graven, designed image whereby through a series of rituals and whatnot, deities, whatever god you want it to possess, would then enter into it and dwell within that image. And so, as one scholar put it, graven images localized a deity. And this allowed people to offer sacrifices, barter with the gods, worship it, and the gods would in turn bring good crops, keep them safe, and all of that. So you would serve the graven images. You would bring food and other items to it. Now, this is foreign to us because we're Christians, and Christianity came to dominate the West. And so a lot of this has been pushed out of, for the most part, our society. This was the opposite back then, to where this world I'm describing was the common experience. Whether you're in Egypt, Canaan, Babylon, Persia, Greece, wherever, this would have been the common experience. So in some cultures, like in Egypt, you would have what was called the opening of the mouth ceremony. And this ceremony invited the deity to take possession of an item. And so you would go to a blacksmith, a woodworker, someone like that, and say, I want a depiction, an image of Osiris or Ra or something like that. And then you would get the, to use our terms, the priests, the religious leaders, and then they would come, do the opening of the mouth ceremony, at which point the deity would then indwell in that. So that means that if you were to destroy the idol, the god didn't cease to exist. it just no longer existed within, I think I'm using the right language, within that idol. So it has to be replaced. So this was common. It shows up all over the Bible. So for example, so what is it? It localized gods. And so this meant that in warfare, if you took the idols of your enemy, they could no longer fight against you. The gods literally were no longer on their side. They've been stolen. Now that's weird to us. You mean to tell me you can just take their gods? Well, yeah, because they associated gods with property. Go back to our study of Judges. We see this all over the place. Remember when David has to flee to Moab in 1 Samuel? David complains. He says, you took me to a place of the Moabite gods, that the gods had possession of that land. That you localized the deities, and this is the real temptation of it. And so you would have gods of fertility in your home because you want to have a large family. You would have gods on your farm because you want fruitful land. You would have gods in your government space because it would represent the nation itself. The pharaoh or the king would be a demigod and would be called the image of God. We'll come back to that. And so this was common parlance in this world. Remember the story of when the Philistines take the Ark of the Covenants. Now remember, the ark represents the presence of God. And they probably associated that with their idol theology. So they take the ark, which symbolically means God can no longer fight on the side of the Israelites. But what happened? They brought it to Dagon, their god. And what happened is Dagon gets his head chopped off. And then what happens is they start to freak out because they start breaking out in boils. What's happening? God is fighting without the Israelites. Because God isn't bound to a statue. Yes, it's the Ark of the Covenant, and there's a lot of symbolism there. But God goes where God goes, and you can't stop him. So what they have to do is they have to carefully bring it back. And then that space has been desecrated to the Philistines. That Yahweh now possesses that land because he's triumphed over the Philistine god. This is a weird world to us, but it is the world of the Bible. And the Bible's clear never to tolerate this sort of practice. But the language is what is most important. Why is God against making a carved image in any likeness? It is because God has already made that. You don't need to make images of God. God has made images of himself. Look around. Genesis 1:26. God said, let us make man in our image after our likeness. That's our theology of humanity, the doctrine of anthropology. This shapes so much of everything. Now it lies at the foundation of our understanding of worship. So we don't create images of God. We are images of God. And you can see this throughout the rest of the Bible. I'll just give you a few in the Pentateuch. Genesis 5:3, when Adam lived 130 years, he fathered a son. Now that's impressive. Notice, he fathered him in his own likeness after his image. It's an inversion. For it's image and then likeness. Here it's likeness and image. It's still the same message. So what is Moses trying to get here? Is it isn't that Adam and Eve alone are made in the image of God, but all descendants of humanity are in the image of God. So Adam's son is in his likeness, which is the image of God. So remember, Adam means man. So Adam, man, is made in the image of God. Man had a son who's in the image of Adam, who, again, is made in the image of God. So this is the theology of worship, and why this second commandment is so serious. It's a violation of this idea. Deuteronomy 4:16, beware lest you act corruptly by making a carved image for yourself in the form of any figure, the likeness of male or female. Notice, it's interesting, isn't it? Don't make an image like a man or a woman, because men and women are already in the image. And the image you create is a corruption of what God has already created. You and I are not better artists than God. You see how important that is to the theology. Deuteronomy 5, this is the giving of the Ten Commandments. You shall not make for yourself a carved image or any likeness of anything that is in heaven above, earth beneath, or in the water or under the earth. Don't make any image or likeness. So idolatry rejects the fundamental theology of the Bible. God cannot be bound, God cannot be depicted, and humans should not trade their special status. Why would we trade the presence of God within us with an object or with some sort of God? So consider, for example, this language in Genesis 2. When no bush of the field was yet in the land, and no small plant in the field had yet sprung up, for the Lord God had not caused it to rain on the land, and there was no man to work the ground. So that's the setup. Now here's the surgery. A mist was going up from the land and was watering the whole face of the ground. All that comes back in the Noah story. The Lord God formed the man of dust from the ground and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life. The man became a living creature, a nephesh, a living soul, a living being. So what do we have here? In the ancient world, you would create a garden for two people. A king, who was a demigod. It was the image of a god on earth, and graven images. In the Bible, God creates a garden for who? Himself and his image bearers. Notice the language. He breathed into his nostrils the breath of life. That is the opening of the mouth ceremony. Isn't that cool? So a priest would come. All right, you got your little statue? Oh, isn't that cute? It looks like Spear of Brittany, but we're going to go with it. I'm going to do this ceremony, and now it is a living statue, if you will. It has the presence of divine power within it. You've got to serve it. You've got to keep it clean. You've got to bring food to it. You've got to pray to it. You've got to make sacrifices to it. But this is a God born in an image, carved by man. But then we read the Bible, and what it says is God says, no, you don't understand. I've already made the image, and I put those images in a garden. And the garden is where God dwells. It's his garden. It's the top of a mountain. This is a radical idea from the ancient world. So you can see then the second commandment is to say, don't go back to that lesser theology. This is way better. So there's that, still prologue. And then there's this phrase, I, your Lord, am a jealous God. This is a common description of God. I'll give you two examples. Exodus 30 is a jealous God. Notice repetition. By the way, this is the story of the golden calf. So Moses comes down from the mountain with the Ten Commandments, and you've heard me say he breaks the Ten Commandments. I think that's symbolic that Israel has already broken all the Ten Commandments. They're down there with the golden calf. Deuteronomy 4, the Lord your God is a consuming fire. We talked about that a few weeks ago. A jealous God. By the way, this idea of God as being jealous, my name is jealous, Oprah claims this is why she left Christianity. I mean, of all things. She couldn't wrap her mind around the idea God is jealous. I think it's pretty simple. I'm jealous. I'm jealous for my wife. If some dude comes hitting on her, someone's going to be hitting on him, right? I mean, is that fair to say? I'm jealous. She's jealous. If some girl comes up, I've told this story before. It was years ago here. It took me like 3 days to figure this out. I think there was a woman at a Speedway who flirted with me. It took me like 3 days to figure this out. Like, it was weird, and then I kept playing in my head, and I thought, I think she was flirting with me. And then it became like, I think she was flirting with me. Hey, honey, I've got options now, you know? Now, she knows I'm joking, and I couldn't tell you what she looks like. It was like this weird back and forth. I was wearing like a Louisville shirt. She was, well, we don't let Louisville, all that sort of stuff. But the way she was saying it was just weird. I felt like, oh, she was trying to get my number or something. And I'm over here like, you see this? But I was too obtuse to even notice that maybe she was, I wouldn't know what it's like to be flirted with, okay? But if someone really did come up and want to flirt with me, I can't imagine that scenario. Let me tell you, Mama Bear ain't going to like that at all. Why? She's jealous. Isn't that good? Jealous is rooted in love. You remember that idolatry in the Bible is often compared to adultery. And that jealousy protects the relationship. That we don't go down this path because our relationship is too important to threaten it. So God is a jealous God. He doesn't want his glory diminished nor shared with something lesser than him. That's the big idea here. And then verse 5, you see it talks about the third and fourth generation. Some people get confused on this. What you likely have here is that each family, each home, had represented within it 3 to 4 generations. We have a house, and you have 2 generations represented, the parents and their kids. Back then you had a house, and it could be up to 4 generations living in that one house. Just a very different world. So if the patriarch goes in the way of idolatry, everyone under his authority goes after that idolatry. And so that's not good. Okay. Well, we got to move. There's more to say there. Let's look at least at the prohibition. I'd like to get to promotion, but that's okay if we have. What is this commandment prohibiting? Here's the first one. We don't spend any time on it. Idolatry. We talked about it last week. This is why the first and second commandment are very similar, and a lot of times they're put together. Moeller says the command prohibits anything that is to attract the eyes in order to seduce the soul. I think that's a good way of putting that. So it's idolatry. It's kind of obvious. Here's the other one. Diminishing God's glory. Worshipping graven images, physical objects, or depictions of the divine, at the end of the day, its main problem is that it diminishes God's essence. Let me share this with, I think I have this up here. Yeah, I'm going to put them all up here at once because they're kind of lengthy and this was just easier. First of all, graven images is a problem because God is spirit and not bound by our imagination or bound by material. Jesus made it clear to the woman at the well that God is spirit, meaning that God has no form or specific look. Graven images bound gods to a specific space, limiting its presence. So you could pick up the image and move it, the vacuum, I'm sure, or to take it, if you decide to move across town, you can take that image with you. Now pause and think about that. You can pick up the image of God and bring it with you. It's absurd. And in the Bible, you get the tabernacle and the temple where God's presence comes to be with his people. But the Bible always states, I am not bound by a tent. I am not limited to a thick curtain in the Holy of Holies. And we see God showing up everywhere. And so God is spirit. You can't limit him to a certain space, time, and whatnot. Also, you need to note that graven images are limited to the human imagination. Now, we humans have created incredible things. I remember as a kid, growing up in a small town, when you go to the city, it just didn't seem real. Those buildings, like what we can build is absolutely incredible. The skyscrapers, you understand skyscrapers is a modern idea. It's not really until the invention of steel. It got to where we couldn't expand out wide in our cities. We had to expand up, and we were able to figure out the technological advancements to do that. It really is incredible. What we can do is absolutely amazing. If you haven't been to the Capitol yet, come by. You've only got a few weeks left. We're down to the governor and lieutenant governors, the only people left in the Capitol now. It is absolutely gorgeous. But even with the best thing we can create, it pales in comparison to how we can imagine God. And that's the issue, is you will always diminish God. He isn't bound to our creativity or imagination. Furthermore, God is infinite and cannot be diminished or destroyed. Images break, they burn, they decay, they rust, they rot, they can be burned. The implication, therefore, is that God as well must be finite or at least weak. This possibility is beyond acceptable in the Bible. Remember, Dagon, the image, had his head chopped off. I mean, what a silly idea that anyone could defeat a God. It's absolutely absurd. God is infinite and unlimited. I don't think I have this on your screen, but I want to read it to you. This is, if you want to know if God has a sense of humor, consider Isaiah 44. All who fashion idols are nothing. The things they delight in do not profit. Their witnesses neither see nor know, that they may be put to shame. Who fashions a god or casts an idol that is profitable for nothing? Behold, all his companions shall be put to shame, and the craftsmen are only human. The ironsmith takes a cutting tool and works it over the coals. He fashions it with hammers and works it with a strong arm. He becomes hungry and his strength fails. He drinks no water and is faint. The carpenter stretches a line. He marks it out with a pencil. He shapes it with planes and marks it with the compass. He shapes it into the figure of a man with the beauty of a man to dwell in a house. He cuts down cedars. He chooses a cypress tree or an oak and lets it grow strong among the trees of the forest. He plants a cedar and rain nourishes it. Then it becomes fuel for a man. He takes a part of it and warms himself. He kindles a fire and bakes bread. Also, he makes a god and worships it. He makes it an idol and falls down before it. Half of it he burns in the fire. Over the half he eats meat. He roasts it and is satisfied. Also, he warms himself and says, "Ha, I am warm. I have seen the fire." And the rest of it he makes into a god, his idol, and falls down to it and worship it. He prays to it and says, "Deliver me, for you are my God." God is making fun of idolaters. Remember, 99% of the ancient world were idolaters. God is mocking them. The numbers don't look too promising. I mean, think about it. He says, you're going to cut down a tree out in the forest. You raised it, you planted it, you watered it, it got real tall, and you cut it down. He says, okay, I'm going to make a fire out of it in order to eat. I'm going to burn... You're going to stay warm, so you're going to burn it to stay warm, burn it to cook your meal, and then the rest of it you're going to turn into a statue, and you're going to say, "This is my God." Well, that's silly. Now remember, it isn't that the wood itself is divine, but that the deities inherit it. It will enter into it, and then it represents the divine. But even then, what you're doing is you're limiting the very idea of the divine. Because the wood that burned in your fire is the same wood you're bound down to as if it is divine. Couldn't someone just throw it into the fire? And then what does that say of your God? I mean, it really is incredible. God is sovereign and cannot be appeased or manipulated. Man-made images are designed and edited and defined by man. God is beyond those categories and limitations. Images, as we said, are limited by the Creator. I've mentioned this before. If you're trying to tell a story and you have a character who's really smart, that character will only be as smart as the author. So if we can't write super genius characters, how can we depict God? It's quite limited. Images are also controlled by their creators. At the root of the human heart is the desire to tell God what to do. This is what we all want. We want to take God's position. All forms of sin and idolatry have this at the root. So, finally, God is self-sufficient and does not need help. Remember that the idols were served. You brought it food. You brought it water. You kept it warm. You kept it out of the rain. You built a little house, and you protected it. You had armed guards 24 hours a day, keep people from messing with it. It sounds so weird, but the implication is that God needs us to protect him. So Paul deals with this directly. Acts 17, the God who made the world and everything in it, being Lord of heaven and earth, does not live in temples made by man. Doesn't need to. Nor is he served by human hands, as though he needed anything, since he himself gives to all mankind life and breath. And there it is again. Why? He gives life and breath because we're the images. So God doesn't need to be served, but rather he's the one that gives us life. It's as if God is serving us in the sense that he's given us the ability to exist. He's our creator. And remember, this is the context of Paul surrounded by these images in Athens. He looks at the one and says to the unknown God, he goes, I can tell you the one you're missing, but you can't make an image of him. He's beyond that. Here's the humorous way of dealing with idolatry. You know it well. They took the bull. This is Elijah. He took the bull that was given them, the prophets of Baal, and they prepared it and called upon the name of Baal from morning until noon. That's a long worship service. Saying, "Oh, Baal, answer us." But there was no voice. Remember that phrase. There was no voice. No one answered. Now remember, what they have are images. Images are to be seen, not heard. Remember that. That's very important. And at noon, so Elijah like, all right, enough's enough. All right, I'm getting hungry here. Elijah mocked them, saying, cry aloud. He's a god. Either he's musing, or he's relieving himself, or he is on a journey. Perhaps he's asleep and must be awakened. Now, the humor there is obvious. But notice the implication. Maybe he's too busy, or maybe he needs you to help him find his way back. But remember that God is self-sufficient. God is sovereign. God doesn't need us. And there's a lot of like, well, maybe your problem is you haven't been feeding Baal well enough. Maybe the problem is the house that he dwells in isn't nice enough. Maybe the statue should be taller. So what he decided to do is go on a journey. He's taking a vacation. You all have worn him out. I mean, it's humorous. But you can see Elijah is taking this idea right from a Jewish perspective head on. So here's the third thing that this prohibits. It prohibits gazing apart from listening. I think this is really revelatory. Go back to the story of Elijah. What's the accusation? The accusation is he cannot hear because idols are meant to be seen. You come into first Judaism and then Christianity, what is it? God is not to be seen. God is to be heard. Therefore, God is to be known. That's what matters. So, Christianity is not a religion of ritual or traditions. You just do the things and you've got your altars, you've got your fancy dress, you're in your fancy building. It's all sights and sounds. Rather, Christianity is rooted in story. It's revelation. It is a story that is to be heard and then obeyed. Received and obeyed, and we grow in knowledge, intimacy with our God. It's a radically different message you're going to get from anywhere else. And that becomes the problem. When you depict God or replace God by an image of some sort, that God becomes something that is to be seen and experienced, not a God who is to be heard and known. That's the problem. This is the real root of it. God reveals himself audibly, not visually. We see God not through his appearing, but through his works, his creation, his redemption. So let me just show you Deuteronomy 4:12. Then the Lord spoke to you out of the midst of the fire. We talked about that in our study of the fire. Very important phrase. You heard the sound of words. You saw no form, only a voice. What did Elijah say to the prophets of Baal? Oh, you're not hearing a voice? You see his form, but he's not talking. Now think about that. Which one is better? To hear or to see? I want you to think about your marriage. Do you want a spouse that you can lay down at night and that's it? Or do you want a spouse whom you can engage in intimate knowledge and conversation? What does God offer us? He's one who reveals by speaking. And you know he is present by his works, not by sights. In his creation and in his redemption, stuff like that. Deuteronomy 4, therefore watch yourselves, be very careful, since you saw no form when the Lord spoke to you. Beware lest you act corruptly by making a carved image for yourselves in the form of any figure, likeness of male, female, animal, winged bird, things that creep, fish, so on and so forth. Be careful. God is the one who speaks. He does not manifest himself physically. So gazing, I think this is important. C.S. Lewis is helpful here. In the modern world, we say, well, we don't have these graven images, and we do. But one of the problems we have is we imagine God in certain ways. Well, I want a God like this. I want a God who acts and functions like this. Well, our imagination may be betraying us there. And it is interesting, isn't it? We only listen to the voice of God when he concurs with what we already want him to say. It's hard to listen to someone when you're trying to put words in their mouths, isn't it? That's just a form of idolatry. In the West, we've made an image of God in our own image. And we, of course, do have graven images. I think the number one graven image, it would seem, is our cell phones. If you don't believe me, go 6 hours without one. All right, leave it at home. See how you do. It's tough. It is the source of all knowledge. It is the source of all entertainment. It is the source of all meaning. It's the source of everything. We cannot function without it. And isn't it nice? You can have God on your phone. I've got the ESV app. That's what I often read my Bible out of. And I would do the Bible app, but I don't want to have to go through having to choose I'm going to do the ESV anyways. I'm just going to download the ESV app. Aren't I spiritual? Think about it. You could do your prayer app. You could do your meditation app. You could do everything. It really is amazing what we've done, how much of ourselves we've given. Not just our phone, to everything. A lot of technology, a lot of other stuff. We can turn other people into idols, so on and so forth. We got time. Let me see, because there's one thing maybe we'll return back to. What is the command promoting? We see the negative. Avoid these things. What is it promoting? Two things. One, I don't want to spend forever on. That is proper worship. Oh, that should say promotion. Sorry, I forgot to copy and paste. Or maybe the problem is I did copy and paste. I didn't replace it. Proper worship. This should be obvious. The first commandment tells you who to worship. Second commandment tells you how to worship. And you do not worship with graven images. Oh, can I just add a little footnote here? Have you noticed, I don't know if you've been to other denominations, other churches, our pulpit is right here in the middle. You've noticed that, right? Baptist churches. Every Baptist church you go to, it's right there in the middle. Your homework this week is to go visit an Episcopalian church, a Methodist sanctuary, a Catholic sanctuary, a Lutheran sanctuary. Where were we? We were in Virginia, and they were all Anglican churches because it was historic, colonial, all that sort of stuff. And so it's all Anglican. And then, we beat the Brits, and we don't want that anymore. So, but if you go to these old churches, where's the pulpit? Have you been in these churches? Where are they? Like over here somewhere. So what's in the middle? It's the altar. Now, I'm not accusing these other denominations of idolatry. I'm not. But why do we put the pulpit right in the middle? Lutherans, Martin Luther, would preach over to the side. One of my favorite paintings is actually Luther doing that. Why is that? Baptists believe the center of worship is the proclamation of the Word of God. That's the center of worship. And so when we express worship, it is in that context. We're central. And so we worship what we know, and what we know is given to us by the Word of God. So the songs we choose matter. Now, particularly in the Catholic tradition, the altar is in the middle because that's the center of worship. It's Mass. It's the breaking of the bread that's the body of Christ. Stuff like that. Right? So that is not a Baptist way of thinking of things. And of course, we're right? But proper worship. If we had time, we could do church history, talk about iconoclasm and how this has been a big debate. When do we cross a certain line? Let me just say, for me, I like that Baptists are boring. Our buildings are boring. I also don't like that our buildings are boring. Can we pick another color than white? Is that okay? Why are all of our churches just painted white? Can we try just, a mother of pearl? Look at her. That's a color I've heard of. I couldn't tell you what a mother of pearl looks like, But it would be nice. Would it kill us to add a little paint? We have one room painted in this church, and it's the polka dot room for the old middle school girls back in the day, That's it. Well, I guess our youth room is. But we would do well to create as a reflection of being image bearers. But we are very careful in not having objects of veneration that people may associate with the presence of God or the worship of God. We're very careful with this. The songs we choose, the things we include, must be rooted in the Word of God. Here's the other thing worth discussing, and I am disappointed this is not discussed more in commentaries or books on the Ten Commandments. I've got about 6 books I'm going through plus commentaries. It's 6, give or take. And hardly any of them really develop this. And I'm really disappointed in this. Jesus. What do we have in Jesus? You'll get some theological debate is how do we think about this? And it's usually not a very helpful debate. Who is Jesus? Scripture's clear. Jesus is the image of God. He is the image of God. He is the incarnated God. God made flesh. The greatest mystery of all mysteries. How God added to his nature in the second person of the Trinity, Jesus. Remember what Jesus said in chapter 14 to Thomas? Thomas, what do you mean you want me to show you the Father? Dude, I'm right here, you know? Like, when you see me, you're seeing the Father. Understand how blasphemous that is unless it is true. To say that the Father has been incarnated. Let me give you some Bible verses here. John 1:14. The Word, the Logos, Jesus, became flesh. The Logos, the Creator. And so go back to the first three verses of John 1. In the beginning was the Word, clearly creation language. The Word was with God. The Word was God. Notice both with and was. Both are true. And nothing that was created without Him. You know, and here, so the Word has become flesh. So He's up there creating. The Creator has become incarnated. He's become flesh, and He is tabernacled. That's the literal word in the Greek. Dwelt, tabernacled among us. So the theology of the temple is now found in the Logos. So now He isn't bound to that building over there. He walks among us. He dwells among us. He has pitched His tent among us. So remember that John writes in the we at the end. He has witnesses and stuff. So we, the apostles and the other eyewitnesses, we have seen the glory of the Logos. We've seen it. Now there are hints of that in the Old Testament. Theophanies. Moses at the burning bush. The fire that leads them by day and the cloud by night. The ascension of the fire in the tabernacle, later the temple. You get the figure with Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. You get those. But what is John saying? Is that everyone who saw the Logos incarnated, Jesus Christ, beheld the glory of God, and they lived. This is an astounding statement to make. Like for the Jew to come to here, they would have to pause and say, this is not possible. God can't do this. Glory as of the only Son from the Father, full of grace and truth. It's a radical, radical verse right there. Or consider Colossians 1. This is Paul. Christ is the image of the invisible God. Well, this is clearly in response to the second commandment. Don't make graven images. Now remember, you are the image of God. But God went farther and He became, you got to be careful with heresy, He became one of us. So He is both the image of God, but He is the image of God. God in flesh. I mean, it's the greatest mystery of all mysteries. You think about it too much, you'll find yourself under your bed in the fetal position, reciting the Greek alphabet, sucking your thumb. Right? You don't want to be there. You don't want to be there. 2 Corinthians 4, in their case, the God of this world has blinded the minds of unbelievers to keep them from seeing the light of the gospel, the glory of Christ, who is the image of Christ. Notice glory and image right there. It's incredible, absolutely incredible to see. I think I have one more for you. Hebrews. Long ago, God spoke to our fathers by the prophets. Notice that God is the one who speaks. He is not to be seen. But in these last days, He has spoken to us by His Son. Now, how did God speak by His Son? He spoke by His Son speaking. But He has spoken by His Son's works, His ministry, His death, His resurrection, but also by His Son's presence. Understand what Christians were saying is that God, incarnated as a human, was crucified. I mean, this is an unbelievable worldview. It just shatters all categories in the ancient world. The Romans couldn't understand that, the idea of the Logos becoming flesh, because the flesh was something to be avoided, not something to be taken on. The Jews didn't like it for 1,000 reasons. But now He has spoken to us by His Son, whom He appointed the heir of all things, through whom also He created the world. This idea of creation comes back over and over again. He is the radiance of the glory of God and the exact imprint of his nature, and he upholds the universe by the word of his power. The exact imprint of his nature. And I could give you another half dozen. It's very clear what the New Testament is saying about Jesus. So, what is the point? The debate in this regard is, should we therefore make images of Jesus? And I don't have all the answer to that. This really came to the forefront when the Passion of Christ movie came out. Some of y'all may remember that. Supposedly they're working on the sequel. I don't know. He's risen. Yay. That's over with. Should be a short movie. But this was the big debate. Should you go watch movies where Jesus is depicted? I go on back and forth on all this. The one temptation is to turn Jim Caviezel into what Jesus must have looked like. That's a problem. Like, do not do that. But it is equally true, God has revealed himself in Jesus. Jesus is the revelation of God. Now, I don't know what he looks like. Have fun with the Shroud of Turin if you want to, okay? But I don't know what he looks like. So I can't depict Jesus with accuracy. And any depiction I do have of Jesus is therefore inaccurate. My imagination isn't that good or bad. I don't know. But the main point is not how we depict Jesus, but that in Jesus we have God made flesh. That's the good news of the gospel. Guys, you don't need to create this. It pales in comparison, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to show up and walk among you, and I'm going to redeem you from idolatry because I want you to know me intimately. That's the beauty of the second commandment. Okay, I have talked enough, and I've worn you all out. I prayed Monday, didn't I, Danny? That was me. That means you got to pray this time, right? Did we miss anything, Daniel? All right, good deal. Why don't you close us out in prayer?